The Hidden Leaf Village basked in the golden light of late afternoon, its streets bustling with shinobi returning from missions and civilians preparing for the evening market. The Hokage monument loomed overhead, its carved faces a silent testament to the village's legacy. Among the crowd, Naruto Uzumaki weaved through the throng with his usual boundless energy, a grin plastered across his face as he balanced a towering stack of ramen cups in his arms. "Hey, Sakura-chan. Kakashi-sensei," he called, spotting his teammates near the training grounds. Sakura sighed, shaking her head at his antics, while Kakashi barely glanced up from his ever-present book. "You're late, Naruto," Sakura chided, though the fondness in her voice softened the reprimand. Yeah, but I brought snacks." Naruto shot back, plopping down beside them and tearing into a cup of miso ramen. The three of them had been training relentlessly these past few weeks, pushing their limits in preparation for an upcoming mission, one that had been shrouded in secrecy. Kakashi finally snapped his book shut, his lone visible eye crinkling in amusement. "We've got a briefing in 10 minutes. Seems the old man has something big for us." Naruto's eyes lit up. "Finally. I've been itching for a real challenge." Sakura rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her own excitement. Despite their differences, Team 7 had grown into a well-oiled machine, their bond forged through countless battles. At the Hokage's office, Tsunade's stern expression told them this was no ordinary mission. "We've received reports of a disturbance near the Valley of the End," she began, her fingers steepled on the desk. "A strange energy signature has been detected, one that disrupts chakra flow. Jutsus are failing in the area, and we don't know why." Naruto frowned, his mind racing. A world without jutsu? That was unthinkable. "We're sending you three to investigate," Tsunade continued. "This could be the work of a new enemy, and we need to know what we're dealing with before it spreads." The journey to the Valley of the End was uneventful at first, the trio moving swiftly through the dense forest that separated the village from the historic battlefield. But as they neared their destination, the air grew thick with an unnatural stillness. The birds had fallen silent, and even the rustle of leaves seemed muted. "Something's off," Sakura muttered, her fists clenching. Kakashi's Sharingan flickered to life, scanning their surroundings. "Stay sharp." Then, without warning, the ground trembled. A dark fissure split the earth ahead of them, and from its depths emerged a figure clad in tattered robes, their face obscured by a mask etched with unfamiliar symbols. "So, the leaf sends its finest," the stranger mused, their voice a hollow echo. "Pity you won't be returning." Naruto didn't hesitate. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, falling into a battle stance. The stranger merely chuckled, raising a hand. A pulse of energy rippled outward, and Naruto felt it immediately, his chakra flickered, unstable. The fight erupted in an instant. Naruto lunged forward, his fist crackling with a Rasengan, but the technique sputtered and died before impact. "What the?" He barely had time to react before the enemy was upon him, a blade of pure energy slicing through the air. Kakashi intercepted with a kunai, the clash sending sparks flying. "They're disrupting our chakra," he barked. Sakura, relying on her raw strength, smashed her fist into the ground, sending debris flying toward their foe. The masked figure dodged effortlessly, countering with a whip of shadow that coiled around her ankle and yanked her off balance. Naruto gritted his teeth, reaching deep for Kurama's power. The familiar surge of Nine Tails chakra flared, but then flickered like a dying flame. "Not good," Kurama's voice growled in his mind. "This energy. It's suppressing me too." Panic threatened to rise, but Naruto shoved it down. "No jutsu? Fine." He'd fight the old-fashioned way. With a roar, he charged, his movements a blur even without chakra enhancement. The masked figure barely managed to block his punch, the force sending them skidding backward. Impressive, they admitted. But futile. The battle raged, each member of Team 7 adapting on the fly. Kakashi relied on taijutsu and precision strikes, his Sharingan tracking every micromovement. Sakura used her medical knowledge to predict attacks, her fists a relentless barrage. And Naruto fought with sheer stubborn will, refusing to yield even as his usual arsenal was stripped away. Just as it seemed they might gain the upper hand, the sky darkened. A shadow crept across the sun, casting the valley into eerie twilight. The masked figure raised their arms, chanting in a language that made Naruto's skin crawl. The earth trembled again, and this time, the rift widened, revealing a swirling void of black and violet energy. "Behold," the figure intoned, "the Chakra Eclipse. The end of your world as you know it." Naruto's breath caught. This wasn't just an attack, it was a catastrophe in the making. And if they didn't stop it here, now, everything they'd fought for would be erased. To be continued. The sky above Konoha darkened unnaturally, the sun swallowed by an inky void that pulsed with eerie energy. Naruto Uzumaki clenched his fists, the familiar warmth of his chakra flickering like a dying flame. Around him, the village's strongest shinobi stood tense, their usual confidence shaken. "It's spreading faster than we thought," Shikamaru muttered, his shadow stretching long and thin as if recoiling from the eclipse's touch. Sakura's medical glow sputtered in her palms before vanishing entirely, her breath catching. Even basic chakra control is unstable. If this keeps up. A distant explosion cut her off. Rock debris rained down as the outer wall of Konoha crumbled, dust clouds revealing a squad of rogue nin, ones they'd fought before, but now their movements were sharper, their eyes gleaming with stolen power. "They're not affected?" Naruto growled, his usual grin absent. A kunai whizzed toward him, and he barely dodged, his reflexes dulled without the nine tails instinctive boost. Sasuke's Sharingan spun, but the moment he tried to activate Amaterasu, the black flames flickered and died. His jaw tightened. They've adapted. Whatever this eclipse is, they're using it. The rogue leader, a masked figure with a voice like grating metal, laughed. "Did you really think we'd attack without an advantage? Your precious Hokage's chakra is useless now." Naruto's stomach dropped. If Jutsus were failing, they'd have to fight raw, no Rasengan, no clones, just fists and desperation. He exchanged a glance with Sasuke, the old rivalry burning anew in their silent agreement, adapt or die. Lee, ever the optimist, cracked his knuckles. "Then we fight like our sensei taught us, with our bodies." He launched forward, a green blur even without chakra enhancement, but the rogues were ready. One flickered behind him, a poisoned senbon aimed at his neck. Tenten's thrown weapon intercepted it at the last second, though her usual precision was off, the blade clattering uselessly. Choji expanded his arms, but the partial growth left him unbalanced, and a rogue slammed a fist into his ribs. Ino's mind transfer jutsu fizzled before connecting, leaving her staggering. "We're sitting ducks," she shouted. Shikamaru's eyes darted, calculating. The eclipse wasn't just nullifying chakra, it was feeding their enemies. But how? Then he saw it, the rogues' weapons glowed faintly, siphoning the fading energy around them. "They're draining us," he realized. Every failed jutsu makes them stronger. Naruto's fists burned with the effort to summon even a wisp of chakra. He remembered Jiraiya's words, "When your back's against the wall, kid, you don't need power, you need guts." With a roar, he charged, not with a Rasengan, but with a tackle that sent two rogues crashing into a water tower. The impact split the structure, a deluge soaking the battlefield. Sasuke seized the opportunity, kicking a downed rogue into the water before yanking a live wire from a shattered lamp post. The rogue convulsed as electricity arced through the puddles. "Old school," Naruto grinned, but the triumph was short-lived. The masked leader clapped slowly. "Clever. But you're still outmatched." He raised a hand, and the earth beneath them trembled, not from a jutsu, but from something worse. A guttural growl echoed as monstrous, chakra-starved beasts emerged from the forest, their eyes hollow, their bodies warped. The rogues had allies no one anticipated. Hinata's Byakugan strained. "They're not animals. They're people. Experimented on." Her voice wavered. "And they're dying." Naruto's chest tightened. This wasn't just a battle, it was a massacre waiting to happen. He turned to his team, their faces a mix of fear and resolve. "We save everyone. No Jutsus? Fine. We'll fight smarter." And as the eclipse loomed darker, the real battle began. The air hung thick with the scent of burnt earth and ozone as Naruto and his team regrouped in the shadow of the crumbling canyon. The Chakra Eclipse had left them vulnerable, their jutsu flickering like dying embers, and the enemy, a rogue faction of shinobi exploiting the phenomenon, was closing in. Just as Sakura tightened her fist, ready to charge despite the odds, a figure dropped from the cliffs above, landing with a grace that sent dust swirling in lazy spirals. He was tall, his dark hair tied back in a loose ponytail, and his sharp amber eyes gleamed with an unsettling mix of amusement and calculation. A long, curved blade rested at his hip, its hilt wrapped in worn leather. Well, he drawled, scanning the battered group. The great Uzumaki Naruto, brought low by a little cosmic interference. How poetic. Sasuke's Sharingan flickered to life, his body tensing. "Who the hell are you?" The stranger smirked, rolling his shoulders. "Name's Ryota. And before you start throwing kunai, I'm not here to fight you." "Well, not unless you make me." He flicked his wrist, and a scroll unfurled in his palm, revealing a seal pulsing with unfamiliar script. "I know how to counter the eclipse's effects, temporarily, at least. But I'm not handing out freebies. Naruto bristled, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. What's your game, huh? You expect us to trust you just like that? Ryota's grin widened. Trust? No. But you don't have a choice. Those hunters will be here in minutes, and without jutsu, you're sitting ducks. He tapped the scroll. I'll lend you a hand, if you help me retrieve something they stole from my clan. Sakura stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. And why should we believe you're not leading us into a trap? Before Ryota could answer, the ground trembled. A hail of kunai embedded itself into the rocks beside them, and from the dust emerged 3 figures clad in black armor, their faces obscured by masks etched with swirling patterns. The leader cracked his knuckles, his voice a low growl. Hand over the Jinchuriki, and the rest of you walk away. Ryota sighed. See? Told you. In one fluid motion, he bit his thumb and slammed his palm onto the scroll. A pulse of chakra rippled outward, and for a brief, exhilarating moment, Naruto felt his reserve surge back, just enough. The fight erupted in a blur of motion. Sasuke lunged first, his blade clashing against the lead hunter's gauntlet in a shower of sparks. The enemy twisted, driving an elbow toward Sasuke's ribs, but he flipped backward, retaliating with a sweep of his leg that sent the hunter stumbling. Naruto didn't waste time. With a burst of restored chakra, he formed a Rasengan, its light cutting through the gloom as he charged. The second hunter met him head-on, their collision shaking the earth. The man's fist glowed crimson, a bloodline technique Naruto hadn't seen before, and when their attacks met, the force sent them both skidding back. Ryota, meanwhile, moved like a shadow. His sword flashed, deflecting a barrage of senbone before he pivoted, driving his knee into the third hunter's gut. The man gasped, but before he could recover, Ryota's blade was at his throat. Tell me where the relic is, he murmured, and I'll make it quick. The hunter spat at him. Ryota's expression darkened, then his free hand blurred, striking a pressure point that sent the man crumpling to the ground unconscious. Sakura, seizing the opening, delivered a devastating punch to the leader's chest, the impact cratering the rock beneath him. But the hunter grinned through bloody teeth, his hands weaving a rapid series of seals. The ground beneath her feet liquefied, swallowing her up to her knees. Naruto shouted her name, but before he could react, Ryota was there, his sword singing as it severed the hunter's arm mid-seal. The man screamed, collapsing, and Ryota yanked Sakura free with a grunt. Stay sharp, he muttered. Panting, Naruto turned on him. You knew they'd be here. Ryota wiped his blade clean, unbothered. I knew they'd come eventually. But now you see why we need each other. He nodded toward the unconscious hunters. They're just scouts. The real force is holed up in a fortress north of here, with my clan's artifact. And if they unlock its power before the eclipse ends, none of us will survive. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. You're using us. Call it a mutually beneficial alliance, Ryota countered. You get your jutsu back. I get my revenge. And the world doesn't burn. The weight of his words settled over them. Naruto exchanged glances with his team, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Trusting Ryota was a gamble. But with the eclipse looming and an enemy growing stronger by the minute, did they have another choice? Sakura sighed, cracking her knuckles. Fine. But if you double-cross us, I'll break more than your arm. Ryota chuckled. Noted. As they moved out, the uneasy alliance forged in battle, Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that Ryota's arrival had shifted something irrevocably. Whether he was an ally, a rival, or something else entirely, one thing was certain, the stakes had just gotten higher. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and burning earth as Naruto skidded to a halt, his breath ragged. The sky above was a swirling vortex of darkness, the Chakra Eclipse devouring the very essence of ninjutsu. Around him, the battlefield lay in ruins, smoldering craters, shattered trees, and the groans of fallen allies. His fists clenched, nails biting into his palms. They had underestimated the enemy. Sasuke's Sharingan flickered as he parried a strike from the masked figure, his blade screeching against the enemy's kunai. We can't keep this up, he growled, sweat beading on his brow. Every jutsu we use fades before it lands. Naruto gritted his teeth. The eclipse wasn't just suppressing their techniques, it was erasing them entirely. Even Kurama's chakra felt sluggish, like a flame drowning in water. He had to think differently. If brute force wouldn't work, then what? A sudden, guttural scream tore through the chaos. Sakura. Naruto whirled just in time to see her crumple, blood staining her forehead protector as a shadowy tendril, jutsu born but unaffected by the eclipse, retreated into the darkness. The masked figure loomed over her, his voice dripping with amusement. Pitiful. You cling to power that no longer exists. Rage burned through Naruto's veins, but before he could move, Kakashi materialized beside him, his single visible eye sharp. Wait, he hissed. There's something off about him. That wasn't a jutsu, it was something else. Then the figure reached up, fingers curling around the edge of his mask. With a slow, deliberate motion, he peeled it away. Naruto's breath caught. The face beneath was horrifyingly familiar, his own. But not quite. The eyes were hollow, the skin cracked like dried earth, and a sinister grin stretched too wide. Surprised? The figure, this twisted reflection, mocked. I am what you could become. A vessel of pure chakra, unbound by the limitations of this world. Sasuke's grip on his sword tightened. A clone? A genjutsu? No, Kakashi murmured, his voice tight. This is real. The imposter Naruto raised a hand, and the ground trembled. Without a single hand sign, without any discernible technique, the earth split open, swallowing a wounded Shikamaru whole. Naruto lunged, but a force like an invisible wall slammed into him, hurling him back. His body screamed in protest as he crashed into rubble. Why? Naruto choked out, pushing himself up. What do you want? The imposter tilted his head. The same thing you've always wanted. Power. But unlike you, I'm not afraid to take it. Then, with a flick of his wrist, the sky pulsed. The eclipse deepened, and Naruto felt it, the last remnants of his chakra flickering like a dying candle. Desperation clawed at him. They couldn't win like this. But if they couldn't fight with chakra, they'd have to fight without it. Sasuke seemed to reach the same conclusion. With a sharp glance, he sheathed his sword and lunged, not with a chidori, not with any technique, but with raw, brutal speed. The imposter barely dodged, his smirk faltering for the first time. Naruto didn't hesitate. He charged, fists raised, relying on the taijutsu he'd honed through years of brawls. The imposter blocked, but Naruto could see it, the hesitation. This thing wasn't used to fighting without its stolen power. A kunai whizzed past Naruto's ear, Kakashi, exploiting the opening. The imposter twisted, but not fast enough. The blade grazed his cheek, drawing black, oozing blood. For a heartbeat, the battlefield was silent. Then the imposter laughed. A deep, shuddering sound that made the air itself vibrate. Clever, he admitted. But did you really think it would be that easy? His body convulsed, his form rippling like a disturbed reflection. And then, he split. Not into shadow clones, but into 3 identical figures, each radiating the same unnatural aura. Naruto's stomach dropped. 3 against 3. But they were exhausted, injured, running on fumes. The imposters were fresh, their power unchecked. Sasuke wiped blood from his lip. Plan? Kakashi's gaze flickered to Sakura's still form, then back. We survive. Naruto exhaled, forcing his trembling legs to steady. Survival wasn't enough. Not when the enemy wore his face. Not when the world's very chakra was at stake. The imposters attacked as one. And Naruto met them head on. Fists collided, bones rattled, and the battlefield became a blur of motion and pain. Every strike was a gamble, every dodge a miracle. Sasuke moved like a phantom, his blade a silver flash, but one of the imposters caught his wrist, twisting until something snapped. Naruto roared, tackling the assailant, but the other 2 were on him in an instant. A kick to his ribs sent him sprawling, the taste of copper flooding his mouth. Kakashi was faring no better, his movements slowing, his breathing labored. They were losing. Then, a whisper. Believe it. Naruto's head snapped up. That voice. It wasn't his own. It was. A small, pale hand gripped the imposter's ankle. Sakura, her face smeared with blood, her eyes burning with defiance. With a strength that shouldn't have been possible, she wrenched him off balance. The imposter snarled, turning on her. And Naruto saw red. He didn't think. He didn't strategize. He moved on instinct alone, his body a weapon, his rage a guide. He slammed into the imposter with enough force to crack stone, his fists a relentless storm. The imposter staggered, his perfect facade cracking. For the first time, there was fear in those hollow eyes. Naruto didn't let up. He couldn't. Because if this thing was him, if it was what he could become, then he had to prove it wrong. He had to prove that power wasn't just about chakra. It was about heart. With a final, desperate lunge, he drove his fist into the imposter's chest. And the world exploded in light. The eclipse shattered. The imposters screamed, their forms dissolving like smoke in the wind. Naruto collapsed, his vision swimming. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Sasuke's outstretched hand, and Sakura's tear-streaked smile. They'd won. But at what cost? The sky darkened to an eerie crimson as the last remnants of sunlight bled away behind the towering obsidian peaks of the Valley of Silence. Naruto Uzumaki crouched low on the jagged cliffside, his breath ragged, fingers pressed into the cracked earth. Below him, the battlefield was littered with the remnants of failed jutsu, scorched earth where fire should have roared, shattered ice that had never fully formed. The Chakra Eclipse wasn't just suppressing their techniques, it was unraveling them at the source. Sasuke's Sharingan flickered as he landed beside Naruto, his usual composure fraying at the edges. "We can't rely on ninjutsu anymore," he muttered, tightening the strap of his sword. "Even my Rinnegan's abilities are unstable." Naruto clenched his fists, feeling the absence of Kurama's chakra like a phantom limb. The eclipse had severed their link, leaving him hollow. But the enemy wasn't waiting. Shadowy figures emerged from the mist, their movements fluid, unhindered by the eclipse's effects. They wore no insignia, but their taijutsu was lethal, each strike precise, each dodge effortless. Sakura's fist cratered the ground as she intercepted a blade aimed for Naruto's back. "We're sitting ducks if we don't adapt," she barked. The enemy's smirk widened, until Sakura's foot hooked under his knee, twisting him into the path of Sasuke's kunai. They fought like cornered animals, improvising, using the terrain. Naruto hurled a rock into a stalactite, sending it crashing down to block an advance. Sasuke feinted left, then used the enemy's momentum to hurl them into a sinkhole of quicksand like ash. But for every one they took down, 3 more appeared. Then, a voice cut through the chaos, Shikamaru, panting as he dragged a bound prisoner forward. "They're not human," he said. "Their bodies are puppets, controlled by a single source. And I think I know where it's hiding." The team regrouped in a hollowed-out cavern, their only refuge. Shikamaru unfurled a stolen map, tracing a path to a pulsating nexus of energy deep underground. "The eclipse is artificial," he explained. "Someone's weaponizing it. If we destroy the core, we get our chakra back. But we've got maybe 6 hours before the eclipse becomes permanent," Sai added, his usually calm voice edged with urgency. "And whatever's down there won't let us walk in." Naruto exhaled sharply. "Then we move fast." Training was brutal, desperate. Rock Lee drilled them in pure taijutsu, their bodies pushed to the limit. Tenten modified weapons to exploit environmental hazards, explosive tags rigged to cave walls, poisoned senbone dipped in paralytic sap. Even Hinata refined her gentle fist to target the puppet's artificial chakra nodes. When they descended into the abyss, the air itself resisted them, thick with static. The core pulsed ahead, a grotesque orb of swirling darkness, tendrils lashing out like living shadows. The final guardian awaited, a monstrous fusion of flesh and machine, its movements a blur. The battle was chaos. Sakura shattered its armored plating with a single punch, only for the wounds to seal instantly. Sasuke's sword strikes were dodged or absorbed. Naruto, fighting purely on instinct, realized the truth, it was learning from them. So they changed tactics. They fought dirty. Sai's ink beasts provided distractions while Kiba and Akamaru herded the creature into a pit of electrified water. Shino's beetles swarmed its joints, slowing it just enough for Hinata to strike its weak point, a glowing fissure in its chest. With a final, desperate lunge, Naruto drove a kunai wrapped in explosive tags straight into the core. The world erupted in white light, and for the first time in hours, he felt Kurama's voice in his mind again. But as the dust settled, a new horror awaited. The core wasn't destroyed, just wounded. And now, it was angry. The stakes had never been higher. And time was running out. The battlefield trembled as the sky darkened under the eerie glow of the Chakra Eclipse, its oppressive energy stifling the very essence of ninjutsu. Naruto's breath came in ragged gasps as he wiped sweat from his brow, his usual arsenal of shadow clones and Rasengan flickering uselessly in his grasp. Across from him, the enemy, cloaked in swirling dark chakra, grinned, sensing his vulnerability. "No more tricks, Hokage," they taunted, lunging forward with a blade humming with raw energy. Naruto barely dodged, the wind from the slash tearing at his cloak. He had to adapt, fast. Nearby, Sasuke's Sharingan spun wildly, his Rinnegan flaring as he analyzed the shifting battlefield. Without jutsu, even his most devastating techniques were useless. But he wasn't defenseless. With a sharp inhale, he channeled pure taijutsu, his body moving like lightning. His opponent, a hulking figure wielding twin axes, swung with crushing force, but Sasuke twisted midair, driving a heel into the man's wrist. Bone cracked, and the axe clattered to the ground. Before the enemy could recover, Sasuke pivoted, his elbow smashing into their jaw with enough force to send them skidding back. Pathetic, he muttered, but his chest burned with exertion. They couldn't keep this up forever. Sakura, meanwhile, had already shattered the earth beneath her fists, her superhuman strength unaffected by the eclipse. Her opponent, a lithe, masked foe, danced around her blows, their movements eerily fluid. You rely too much on brute force, they sneered, flipping over her strike and slashing at her back. Sakura barely rolled away in time, feeling the blade graze her vest. Gritting her teeth, she feinted left before suddenly reversing, her fist connecting with their ribs. The masked figure gasped, stumbling, but quickly retaliated with a kick to her side. Sakura staggered, tasting blood. She needed a new approach. Back with Naruto, desperation fueled innovation. If ninjutsu was out, he'd fight like he had in the early days, raw, unpredictable. He feinted a punch, then hooked his leg around his enemy's ankle, yanking them off balance. They snarled, slashing wildly, but Naruto ducked, driving his knee into their gut. The enemy coughed, but retaliated with a chakra-infused palm strike that sent Naruto flying. He hit the ground hard, his vision swimming. But as he pushed himself up, he felt it, a flicker of Kurama's chakra, weak but still there. The eclipse wasn't absolute. Sasuke saw it too. His Rinnegan pulsed as he reached into the depths of his stamina, pushing past the pain. His opponent charged again, axes raised, but this time, Sasuke didn't dodge. At the last second, he sidestepped, gripping the man's wrist and using his momentum to flip him overhead. The enemy crashed into the earth, and Sasuke drove his knee into their chest, pinning them. "You're finished," he growled, but the man laughed, his body suddenly dissolving into shadows. A clone. The real enemy emerged behind him, axe swinging, only for Sakura's fist to intercept, shattering the weapon midair. "Took you long enough," Sasuke said dryly. Sakura smirked. "You're welcome." Together, they fought back to back, their movements syncing flawlessly. The masked foe reappeared, but Sakura was ready. She let them come, baiting them into overextending before grabbing their arm and hurling them into Sasuke's waiting strike. The enemy crumpled, but the battle wasn't over. Naruto, meanwhile, had tapped into something primal. Kurama's chakra, though faint, surged through him in bursts. His fists ignited with flickering orange energy as he traded blows with his enemy, each impact sending shockwaves through the ground. The enemy, realizing Naruto was adapting, unleashed a desperate flurry of attacks, but Naruto weaved through them, his instincts sharper than ever. With a roar, he feinted high before driving a devastating uppercut into their chin. The enemy reeled, and Naruto didn't let up. Grabbing their arm, he spun and hurled them into a nearby boulder, the rock exploding on impact. But the eclipse wasn't done with them. As the enemy struggled to rise, the sky pulsed, and a wave of nullifying energy washed over the battlefield. Naruto's flickering chakra sputtered out. Sasuke's Rinnegan dimmed. Sakura's fists trembled. The enemy grinned through bloody teeth. "Now you die." Yet, in that moment, Naruto laughed. "You still don't get it, do you?" He clenched his fists. "We don't need jutsu to win." With a shared glance, the trio charged as one, their movements pure, unrelenting force. Naruto's fist met the enemy's jaw, Sasuke's kick shattered their ribs, and Sakura's final blow sent them crashing into the earth, unconscious. The eclipse's hold wavered. The sky cracked with light. And as the first rays of dawn broke through, Naruto exhaled, grinning at his teammates. "That's how we do it." The climax had passed, but the war wasn't over yet. The air crackled with residual energy as Naruto stood at the edge of the battlefield, his breath ragged, his orange jacket torn and singed. The sky above was a swirling abyss of black and violet, the chakra eclipse devouring the very essence of ninjutsu, leaving behind only silence where once there had been explosions of fire and lightning. His opponent, a shadowy figure wreathed in stolen power, smirked through the haze. "No more tricks, Uzumaki," the enemy taunted, their voice a distorted echo. "No more jutsu. Just you and me." Naruto clenched his fists, feeling the weight of exhaustion in every muscle. The Kyuubi's chakra flickered weakly within him, the eclipse sapping even its legendary reserves. But he wasn't just a vessel for power, he was a shinobi who had clawed his way from the bottom, who had turned enemies into allies, who had never given up, no matter the odds. He met his foe's gaze, and something inside him steadied. The enemy lunged, a blur of motion, their fist aimed for Naruto's throat. Instinct took over, Naruto twisted, barely avoiding the strike, countering with a sharp elbow to their ribs. The impact sent a shock through his arm, but his opponent barely flinched, retaliating with a knee to his gut. Naruto gasped, stumbling back, but he didn't fall. He couldn't. Behind him, his friends were fighting their own battles, their shouts and grunts filling the air. Sakura's fists cracked stone, Sasuke's sword gleamed despite the eclipse's suppression, their teamwork holding the line. Naruto wiped blood from his lip and grinned. You think taking away jutsu means I'm helpless? He charged, not with a Rasengan, not with a transformation, but with raw, unfiltered determination. His fist connected with the enemy's jaw, snapping their head back. They retaliated with a vicious kick, sending Naruto skidding across the ground. Pain flared, but he forced himself up, his vision swimming. The enemy advanced, their form flickering like a dying flame. You're nothing without your power, they sneered. Naruto's breath hitched. Memories flashed, his lonely childhood, his failures, the faces of those he'd sworn to protect. And then, a voice, quiet but unshakable, rose within him. You've never been alone. It wasn't Kurama. It wasn't any one person. It was all of them, his parents, his teachers, his friends, their belief in him, their sacrifices. He wasn't just fighting for himself. With a roar, Naruto surged forward. His next punch wasn't just his, it carried the weight of every person who had ever stood beside him. The enemy's eyes widened as the blow landed, sending them crashing to the ground. Before they could recover, Naruto was on them, pinning them down, his hand gripping their cloak. This isn't about jutsu, he growled. It's about heart. And mine's never been stronger. The eclipse pulsed, the sky shuddering. And then, light. A brilliant, golden burst erupted from Naruto's body, not chakra, not ninjutsu, but pure will. The enemy screamed as the light consumed them, their stolen power unraveling. The battlefield fell silent. When the glow faded, Naruto stood alone, panting, his body trembling. Around him, the eclipse shattered like glass, the sky clearing to reveal the first hints of dawn. His friends staggered to their feet, their expressions a mix of awe and relief. Sakura was the first to reach him, her hands already glowing green with medical chakra. Idiot, she muttered, but her voice was thick with emotion. Sasuke approached, his Sharingan deactivating. You never do things the easy way, he said, but there was respect in his tone. Naruto laughed weakly, then winced. Wouldn't be me if I did. The aftermath was slow, painful, but hopeful. Villages began rebuilding, alliances reforged. The Chakra Eclipse had changed everything. Without jutsu, even temporarily, the world had been forced to remember the strength of bonds, of strategy, of sheer stubborn will. Naruto, battered but unbroken, stood at the center of it all, not as a savior, but as proof that even in the darkest moments, light could return. And as the sun rose fully, casting its warmth over the scarred land, Naruto knew one thing for certain: this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning.